The last speaker before lunch is my colleague Keivan Zokaei, who I've been working with for the last 5-6 years, something like that. First of all at Cardiff University and then in SA Partners. And I think some of the research activity and some of the practical projects that Keivan has been doing is really helping us show the way in terms of bringing the lean and green agenda together. So Keivan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Hello again from me to everybody. Well, firstly, thank you for being here. It's a great pleasure to see you all in here. I'm going to talk about from lean to lean and green. If you probably have noticed already, and other speakers talked about it, that two schools of thought are converging on the concept of lean and green. On one hand, you've got great lean thinkers like Doc Hall, who got a lot of us started on our lean journey. In the 80s, one of the first translators of Japanese techniques, who now talks about compression. You've got also Peter Senge, a great systems thinker, lean and systems thinking essentially coming from the same background, who talks about green revolution, a number of other people as well. On the other hand, you've got people like Hunter and Paul Hawking and other great sustainability systems thinkers, as I would like to call you, who talk about lean. The first time I got started on lean and green was reading Hunter's book, Natural Capitalism, I think 99 if I'm not mistaken, who first time borrowed from Jim Womack and Dan Cho. So two themes coalescing around the same idea. It's not so highly conceptual, very, very practical. Both schools of thought are very hands-on people. Now, so let's go back to the basics a little bit. What is lean? Anybody here, apart from Peter, so professors can't answer that. No, I'm joking. Anybody here who can just tell me what is lean? Yeah? Yes? Go on then. No? There are no answers? Richard wants to answer that. Yeah.
What does lean mean? A number of things to a number of people.
Yeah.
But, I suppose in my eyes is delivering what the customer wants.
Yes.
In an efficient way.
Yeah. Anything else to be added to that? Yeah. Waste elimination. Yes. And anyone else? Well, and in fact, probably these are the usual answers, and they are, of course, the right. So that is the textbook definition of lean: eliminating different types of waste. Obviously, when you get started, you immediately think they're bound to be good for the environment, for green as well. So you eliminate economic waste that can only be good for environment. Having said that, the catch is often in lean systems you have more frequent deliveries, for example. So more frequent deliveries will mean more emissions, and so on and so forth. So it can be as straightforward as that. But let's actually go and revisit what we meant by waste elimination originally. Let's just pick one of these, defects or quality. How do we define cost of quality? Any engineer doing lean or any quality improvement? So you've got specification limits, upper specification limit and lower specification limit. Anything that falls within the boundaries is okay. Anything outside is not so good. And this is the cost. So the number of items outside the specification limits multiplied by the actual cost of rework or cost of scrapping, that's cost of quality. Everybody agrees with that? Yeah? But actually, yeah, Richard? Yes, you obviously there is the secondary effect that you've upset the customer. Well, let's say there is a quality department that captures everything before it goes out the door. So there is only cost in theory. Well, Dr. Taguchi back in the 60s said quality of a product is the minimum loss imparted to the society from the time it's shipped. A completely different definition of quality. What does that mean? How did he define it? Basically what Dr. Taguchi said, prompted by Dr. Deming, he said, he insisted actually that we have to consider the cost of the product during its use to the society. Was he just saying something altruistic, Had he just joined the Greenpeace or something when he came up with this idea? Probably Greenpeace didn't exist back then, I'm not so sure. But the answer is no. Where Taguchi was coming from is as simple as saying, when you go away from the nominal value in the middle, the chances are that this product itself might be still within the specification limits, but the chances of wear out are higher. So the end-to-end system, so when you assemble various parts into a whole, the chances that that system fails is much higher. So when first time Ford and GM started disassembling first Toyotas back in the 70s, they found out that most of the parts, nearly all the parts on a Toyota are snap fits. It's an automotive term, which means that everything is perfectly fit together, everything is nearly within the specification. Right in the middle of the specification or on target means that during the use of that product it's much more durable, i.e. the total cost of producing that is lower, the reliability is higher for the consumer, and the loss to the society is lower. So it's a win-win-win situation. And that's how Japanese started defining waste and quality. What that means is that you want a much narrower diagram right in the middle, always hitting the nominal value. So if you talk to my friend and co-author, Professor John Seddon, he talks about the same thing in service industries. You have to be always thinking about nominal value. Let's revisit the two logics again. The first one, which tells you you have to be within specification limits. If you try to be always right in the middle, nominal value if you like, that's going to cost you more. If you're good enough, what's the point of costing more? So that's what I call the efficiency logic. Compare that to what Taguchi said, which is the opposite. Taguchi says, think about quality from the whole system point of view. It actually costs less to be always hitting the nominal value. Quality is free, famously Crosby famously said quality is free. Later on, Japanese proved it, Toyota proved it. That's what lean is about. Quality is free. From the whole system point of view, it costs you less. Now, that's what I call the effectiveness logic. So, let's go back. What is real lean? Doing the right thing, as opposed to doing the wrong thing righter. Efficiency logic tells us, do the wrong thing righter. Yeah? Try to reduce cost. Lean tells us try to enhance value. Parallel with that, compression, Doc Hall talks about focus on quality as opposed to quantity. The first one is a lean logic. The second one I've borrowed from a sustainability school of thought. End-to-end flow. Lean talks about optimizing the end-to-end flow. You do not sweat your assets in a lean factory. If you have a factory that every single machine is working, is 100% utilized, a lean thinker will immediately tell you that is not a good factory because you will sub-optimize the whole. In order to optimize the whole, you have to sub-optimize some of the parts. That's a given in lean. Everybody will apply that by doing lean. So a parallel with that, borrowed from Hunter's book, Natural Capitalism, whole system thinking. The famous Operation Cat Drop. Yeah. So now, another one. Hunter just talked about elimination of waste, but that's not just waste in terms of Muda, or 8 different types of waste. Also the underpinning types of waste, which are Muro and Muri, unevenness and overburden, which cause Muda. What's the parallel with that in sustainability? Reduce rather than recycle, if you like. So rather than going to the supermarket and buying a carrier bag and then trying to, taking a carrier bag for free often and then trying to recycle, let's take your own carrier bag and not have one in the first place. Reduce waste rather than recycling. Okay, another great thing, actually a little bit controversial today, engagement of everybody and bottom-up improvement. Actually, last night I changed that from continuous improvement just to bottom-up improvement. I think there is no difference between incremental improvement and revolutionary improvement. They're the same thing. Improvement means eradicating a trade-off, an apparent trade-off. It doesn't matter whether we do that incrementally or in a radical way. I mean, radical and incremental are in our head, in my opinion. It's the same thing. Improvement means you see a trade-off, don't accept it, get over it, eradicate it, eliminate it. Now, my friend Daryl Mann, who teaches TRIZ, a great way of innovation, bases his theory on that. Again, another parallel from natural capitalism, you can take human capital from Doc Hall's book, Compression, you can take vigorous learning organization. Similarly, you can take that from Peter Senge, any of the great thinkers in sustainability. So you can already see lean and green are essentially one and the same thing. They always were meant to be one and the same thing. It's not about we combine them. Actually, they started to be the same thing. I don't know why these two communities aren't talking with each other. Most of the companies I go to, there is the CSR department, and then there is the lean or continuous improvement department, and then nothing is happening between the two. Completely wrong. By the way, often the CSR department are doing things top-down, technological fixes. So they come up with maybe a new technology or some high-level analysis of the footprints, life cycle analysis, and then try to apply that top-down. Obviously, there are problems in that. Continuous improvement departments and lean departments, on the other hand, have learned to do things bottom-up, because they know that engaging everybody is how you have to go about improving. There is a lot of theory around how revolutions happen. Most of those theories point in the direction that they happen unexpectedly as a result of a lot of small changes that nobody noticed. Now, okay, Professor Heinz developed this model known as the lean and green business model. I've borrowed this. Known as the lean business model. I've borrowed this, and with Peter we now changed the wording here, the lean and green business model, because if you want to go lean and green, or green, you have to essentially do all the things you have to do to go lean. In order to go lean, you have to have the right tools and techniques, understand value stream management, and think about your extended supply chain. You have to align the right strategy and deploy it down and up. And then you have to engage everybody. Essentially, to go green, you need all of these elements. I will talk about two case studies today who have managed to realize the synergies between lean and green. What they've done, these two case studies, they've put one and one together and have realized more than two. And that is the principle of synergy in systems thinking. The system is always more than the sum of its parts. So if you do lean properly and if you do green properly, you will create a synergy that is more than just the sum of the two. And these two examples I'm going to talk about have done just that. The first company is a multinational food manufacturing company we've worked with outside the UK. It'll show how lean tools and techniques can be adapted and adopted within a single factory, so process management, just a single factory, to improve environmental bottom line radically. Okay, at SA Partners we developed this toolkit, or the 7 tools of environmental value stream mapping. You lean practitioners in the room will have used the 7 tools of value stream mapping. So this is the equivalent known as the 7 tools of environmental value stream mapping. Similar to value stream mapping, we start with a high level understanding and the process, and then we drill down into more detail. The first tool, I will just be very brief, and I can't go into all 7. I'll just give you a quick overview of what we did. The first one is simply putting a boundary around the factory and looking at the inputs and outputs. A simple mass balance, energy balance. This is the example from the company I mentioned. As simplistic as it might look, this was a huge eye-opener for the site GM. As soon as we put the boundary around the picture of his factory and started looking at the inputs and outputs, he looked at the water and said, well, look, 50,000 tons of water go into my factory every year, and around 15,000 comes out. 35,000 tons go missing. What happens? And we had 20 odd. So this was a Kaizen week, like a lean Kaizen, a week-long event with 20 odd engineers on the shop floor and the site GM working on this. And then he said, so where is the balance? 35,000 tons, thank you very much. And this is not an environmental concern now. This is a hygiene factor because the type of product they had here, it doesn't mix with water at all. And every liter of water going in is accounted for. And 35,000 tons of it is going missing. So the answer was that it actually goes out of the ducts. It evaporates. And it was explained later on by a lot of engineers who rushed at this and explained it. But obviously you have to spend a lot of energy to heat balance your factory. Okay, the second tool applied, we regard it as the green impact matrix. So you've got the 8 types of waste devised by Toyota. We try to stipulate the 8 types of environmental waste, if you like, the equivalents of that. So the energy, CO2 emissions, water, noise and nuisance, so on and so forth. And then you've got down the bottom, you've got the 8 types of waste, and down up there you've got different processes. This is a hotspot analysis. And this is the example from the respective company. Looking at this, you can quickly identify where the hotspots are. And actually, it shows you that actually you don't need to so much worry about the bottom 6. The top 2, in this case, the water and energy, have got most of the red post-its. And by the way, you quickly see where the hotspots are. Then anybody who's done a value stream mapping exercise will have done some sort of big picture mapping, and this is an environmental big picture map. Identifying where those hotspots are, we've picked 10 to focus on, and applies an eco map, which is an adaptation of an A3, a lean A3, which takes you into the detail of each one of the hotspots. Well, like any good A3, it needs to be quick and dirty. So you don't want to see an A3 which is typed up and very tidy. I'm always dubious about saying the nicely done ones. The ones that are handwritten are the good ones. That these are working documents. They're not supposed to be very nicely done. And you can see here an example of it. End of 1 week exercise, 5th day. Some of the results achieved. These are opportunities identified for improvement. There wasn't any need for any great investment at all. All of the savings are in the region of adding a sensor or adding some sort of measuring device or raising a small wall between 2 parts of the process. No huge investment whatsoever. 16% of energy, 3,300 megawatt hours per annum. Annualized saving, 15% of the water saved. That would have costed something in the region of £1.5 million had it been the UK, annualized saving. Now, practically water in this country was free, so it was a lot less, and energy was much cheaper in the case of this particular. But still, very good result investing in 1 week exercise. Typically, when we do this, between 10 to 20% of the utilities saved by just drilling down into the problem areas is a typical result. Most of the time, the environmental manager, the CSR manager, will look at this and say, well, I knew all of that, or maybe I even had plans to do a lot of those. Yes, you did, but had you ever managed to engage everybody within the plant to be focused, squarely focused on those areas and go and deliver it, as Lean does? Lean is all about creating that culture of improvement. And that's arguably the greatest contribution Lean can have to the environmental departments. Now, let's go to the second example. One of the major UK retailers, they've got some ambitious green targets and some very ambitious lean targets, of course. So we followed a ready meal from meat all the way through to retail store. Excuse me. Now, in this case, you can see that it's a populated map like any other good lean map, a lot of detail. Don't worry about the detail. I can just quickly tell you the important information in there is that it takes about, so this is the meat being cut and packed, food manufacturing, prime distribution, secondary distribution, and the store. It takes about 4 days to take the ready meal from there, manufacturing, to put it onto the shelf. The information flow is flowing backwards, obviously, from the consumer, driving that flow of physical goods. We called it the Ready Meal United team of 11 players. My good-looking colleague, Richard, is over there, who is the brain of the program. And this team actually applied some sort of action learning program. This was all about taking senior managers from companies across the chain and take them to the Gemba, where the work is happening. This is something often the environmentalists don't get involved with. So environmental solutions are often on someone's computer and some sort of fix, which is later on applied. But this was an opposite approach. By the way, we didn't have any environmental target to begin with. We were interested in saving the business some money. We started with a lot of lean ambitions. In our hearts of hearts, we knew, and the company that sponsored us knew, that by doing this we will save the environment, because we knew that true lean is truly green. Now, look at the waste, just physical waste, as an example, along this chain. 11.5% of this product was in the bin. That's a lot of money, and that's not atypical. Now, nearly 5% of that is down there in the last 100 yards within retail stores. Those in the retail industry know that the last 100 yards is often a recognized area for a lot of waste. You probably send a lot of your products and they might break some of it in the last 100 yards, and so on and so forth. Another 5% was being lost here. So a lot of that is as a result of products sitting on the shelf and going out of life. But in fact here, there was something peculiar happening that I found in about 83% of the retail industry, having looked at 34 chains end to end. Now, what is that? That is simply, a lot of it is down to misalignment of specification. So the retailers produce the specification, gets communicated down 1 tier, 2 tier, 3 tiers. By the time it gets to the guy who's cutting the meat, it's completely misaligned. In this case, they had a target to cut the meat to 65 grams, and they were adhering to that within the specification, and they were doing a great job. Guess what? That was actually 65 grams was meant to be post-marinated weight, and miscommunication somewhere along the line, and they've taken that to be pre-marination weight. Obviously you marinate then and you add 13% weight on top of that. So there was 13-14% giveaway just to begin, like that. Today this is actually 140k immediate saving per annum, which saves, pays several times over the exercise done. By the way, it's not just economic waste. As we knew from the beginning that there will be some environmental benefits. Cows happen to be responsible for quite a bit of, or Betsy is responsible for quite a bit of global warming. Now, let's look at the future state. So the team gets together, the same United, remember the 11 players, the Ready Meals United. Now, they started thinking about what to do. Let's reduce the number of touches in the supply chain. Let's use RFID appropriately. Let's create more visibility and share information better. Let's reduce the delivery time from 4 days down to less than 2 days. That's the order to delivery lead time. Let's reduce the last 100 yards waste down to 2%. These are some of these we're still working on. But one of the very interesting ones I've highlighted is demand amplification. How many people here are familiar with the term demand distortion or demand amplification? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Well, what happens often is that when the consumers go to the retail store and buy something, there is a little bit of unevenness or variation within that. Naturally, some days there are more customers, some days less. But when that order gets passed on, that variation gets amplified hugely. So in this case, variation around average, around mean, for this particular product was around 20% at the retail store. By the time that was communicated to the food manufacturing company, that was around 45%. By the time that was the same product, the same orders for the packaging, the sleeves that go around, it was communicated down to the packaging manufacturer. Guess what it was? It was 545% variation around mean. That is still, I've mapped 34 supply chains now, I've been involved in teams doing it, and wherever we've mapped it, we've always found this is true. And millions of people have done it, or maybe thousands of people have done this before elsewhere, and they've always found demand amplification exists. This was great source of environmental waste and economic waste. One of the main aims of lean is obviously to get rid of that. It will have a huge impact. That's Mura. You eliminate Mura, it will be very good for the, for the environment. Now, just to give you an overview of the savings from this supply chain, potential savings I must say, because a lot of this is at the moment being implemented. The two bottom are the economic ones, so lowering costs by about less than £8 million per annum. This is only one supply chain. So we took that one SKU and we looked at how many SKUs are exactly the same, i.e. being manufactured on the same line from the same supply, going through exactly the same echelons along the chain. This is only one supply chain, okay? This retailer will have thousands and thousands of these. £8 million potential saving there. Sales uplift of about 6.5 million. A lot of it is in stuff not going out of date, actually going to consumers. So it's win-win for both manufacturer and the retailer. But look at the environmental benefits. 15,000 tons of CO2. That's about 2.5% of the CO2 generated by that company. That's about a third or just over a quarter of the target they've given themselves from one single supply chain. And then look at 20 Olympic-sized pools as water saving. This is a great measure devised by my friend Richard over there. I used to think we have to measure it in liters, and why not in Olympic-sized pools? And then now, okay, so these were the examples for tools, techniques, value stream, and the whole supply chain. Let's move on to strategy. Well, Hunter put up a slide from Tesco. You know what Tesco did? Tesco obviously have got their own scorecard. Everybody within the organization uses steering wheel to align themselves to the corporate strategy and know whether they're doing things right or not. Every single store, every warehouse, every department will have their own steering wheel. Every individual will have their own steering wheel. Now they added a new spoke to it back in 2008. They call it community, but most of the measures on there are actually the environmental or the green measures. So strategy is very important. And in terms of engaging people and great leadership, I shall not dwell on that. Dr. Andy Wood will be talking in the afternoon, a great example of good leadership and engaging people, how to deliver lean and green results. Okay, now just to wrap up. Looking at companies that we've worked with, we ran a research project when I was in academia about a year ago, and this we called it the Lean and Green Research. Actually, Fabian and Peter and a number of other colleagues were involved in that. We carried out a survey, and you can see that this is almost a schematic of how you can conceptualize levels of maturity in terms of understanding lean and green. Companies that are very advanced in lean have realized that there are great benefits in combining that and realizing the synergies with green. Companies that are less advanced in understanding lean, economic lean I mean, are over here. They still see some sort of trade-off between lean and green. That's hardly surprising. Centuries of economic expansion at the cost of natural environment, it's programmed into all of us that if you do something good economically, you're bound to be bad for the environment. A lot of people still in this era here. The paradigm is just here, which is the trade-off thinking. But some companies actually, and most of the companies that we work with really and come to us, they're somehow ambidextrous. They see lean and green to be going in parallel, not necessarily conflicting. So you can have both, but not necessarily any synergies between the two. If you do some lean, there might be some environmental benefits, and you do some greenwash, and then you do some propaganda on that and try to pretend. But really, the good ones are here. They have realized that if you put one and one together, it's more than two, actually. It's the systems thinking principle. They've realized the synergies between the two. The two examples I showed, I would say the first one is there, less advanced in synergy. The second one is fairly advanced in synergy, verging into some symbiosis. So companies that have realized the symbiotic relationship between lean and green are the winners, are the billionaires of the future. These are companies actually know that lean and green are one and the same thing, not two separate things. And that was for me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.